Therefore, stay awake, for you know neither the day nor the hour. That's the lesson that Jesus draws from the parable in the gospel today. Therefore, stay awake, for you know neither the day nor the hour. Stay awake. I think that's a pretty interesting lesson to draw from the gospel. There were 10 virgins in the parable in the gospel, and 5 of them were labeled foolish, and 5 of them were labeled wise. And so with Jesus' command, stay awake, I would assume that the foolish virgins were ones who fell asleep, and the wise virgins were ones who stayed awake. But that's not what happened in the gospel today. Instead, in the parable, all 10 of the virgins fell asleep, the foolish and the wise. And so, as I recall, the real difference between the foolish and the wise was that the foolish didn't have enough oil, whereas the wise did have enough oil. And so I wonder, why didn't Jesus command us to make sure you have enough oil? And why does he command us to stay awake? Well, I think that if we look a little closer at the parable, we can come to understand why. And so the foolish virgins were the ones who didn't bring enough oil. Well, why didn't they? Well, it says in the parable that the bridegroom was long delayed. And so it seems that they didn't expect the bridegroom to take so much time in getting to the rendezvous point. They thought that he would be coming very soon. And they thought that they could relax, that there was no time for anything important to happen before the bridegroom arrived. Their obligation to the bridegroom was fulfilled. They showed up, they had their lamps, they were ready to go. And there was nothing more to expect. In this light, the problem wasn't their physical sleep, but their mental sleep. The fact that they were no longer attentive to the coming of the bridegroom. Like those foolish virgins, we too can be unattentive to the coming of the bridegroom. We too can let his coming fade into the back of our minds. Our lives are busy. We have houses that we have to keep up. We have obligations to friends and family. We come here to Mass. We have to watch the Browns, get the groceries. Some of us have to go to school. We have sports to do. Without hardly even trying, our days can become filled with obligations and commitments. And we rush from one to another, always busy. And even as we travel between our commitments, we're in our cars and we have the radio on and we're listening to the news, music, advertisements. And then we get home and we sit on the sofa and we have our shows. We have more news to watch, more ads. And, for the last 6 months, we've been told that if we're a good person, we should be thinking about and talking about and trying to learn more about the election. And now it seems like we're going to have to keep on thinking and talk about it for some time yet. And so we have all these things that demand our attention and take our time. And so we go through our lives and we don't see the bridegroom. The question that all this brings to my mind is, where is the bridegroom? Is this life something that we just have to get through until before the bridegroom comes? Another thing to think is that, we've all come to Mass. Many of us contributed to the needs of the church. Is that all that the bridegroom expects of us? Is that all that he offers us? Or is the bridegroom coming into our lives every single day? Are we constantly being presented with opportunities to greet him with lighted lamp? The message of the gospel is that the bridegroom is always present to us and that he earnestly desires us to be awake to his presence. Christ wants to love us and he wants to be alive in us. And so in order to perceive him in our lives and receive him as we ought, we have to spend time in silence, waiting, reflecting, and praying. We must set aside time every day in order to feel our thirst for him. And every day we must be still and allow an awareness of his presence to fill us. As long as we do not take time for silence and stillness every day, we will be like those foolish virgins asleep to the bridegroom. But if we act in faith and set time aside for God, we will know his presence.